very bullish on this idea most recently. And there's some work by Brian Bruin and John Holohan sort of thinking about what sorts of costs this would mean in terms of shifts. And they estimate that roughly in 2002 dollars, this kind of federalization would shift 26 billion in long-term care spending from the states to the federal government. What I might assert is that this was purely an accounting estimate. This wasn't an estimate that accounted for any sort of behavioral shifts, the kinds of maybe potential savings, the potential efficiencies that we've been talking about today weren't sort of incorporated into these calculations. It's also, and I think this goes back to the comment over here earlier, it's really unclear whether the feds would do any better. Federalization of Medicaid wouldn't necessarily correct a lot of the problems that are out there. Lack of case management, inadequate primary care, poor quality, high cost. There's plenty of examples of Medicare doing things poorly without any kind of involvement by Medicaid. And as a quick note, I presented a version of this talk at CMS, and I expected them to, one, be very resistant to these ideas. They weren't. They very much said this is a longstanding problem, so they're very much in agreement. I thought they'd be most sort of resistant to this idea. Politically, they thought some sort of single payer or federalization was a much better way of doing things, and so I was actually surprised and somewhat encouraged by the enthusiasm for this kind of approach. Obviously, those are they're not the ones voting on this, and so it'll be interesting to see whether this kind of idea has any legs as we move forward. And once again, I'm not certain you'd want to put everything in the feds. On the federal side, I would be concerned. A lot of the innovation in long-term care has come at the state level. You have the Arizonas, the Minnesotas, the Oregons. There are states that have really gotten ahead of the curve and have done really well. Unfortunately, I won't name names, but there's other states that haven't done so well, that haven't been so innovative. And so how do we kind of raise up and get every state performing well? One idea is federalizing there. Let me quickly state the next steps here. I think the evidence on capitation is mixed. That may be a kind assessment. Some of it, as Marion's saying, maybe we just need longer follow-up. I really would love to see a randomized trial. I think selection is a huge issue, potentially undermining all of the existing studies, and we really need to see more rigorous study platforms. I look forward to working with colleagues on evaluating the P4P demonstration. What size of the reward payment do we need to offer? Can we generate any savings there? Can we do anything about the high rate of hospitalizations? In terms of federalization of Medicaid, I think thinking a little bit more stringently about costs and savings, incorporating these behavioral shifts would be important. Also thinking outside the box about other approaches. In terms of policymakers, I made the point earlier, and I'll repeat it, that I really don't think these approaches need to be introduced in a vacuum. They're certainly not mutually exclusive. You could blend capitation and pay for performance. You could actually do all three together if you so chose. Bill Weissert has a very nice home care program that designed in Arizona that most definitely incorporated capitation and P4P. And so I think we need to think outside the box here. How do we grow managed long-term care, assuming we can actually show that it saves money? We don't want to kind of continue to go down that path if it's not cost savings or quality improving. But what kinds of financial incentives do we have to offer? As we continue to offer financial incentives, it makes it harder and harder to show sort of cost savings, cost effectiveness. So sort of how do we balance sort of financial incentives against sort of this need to show savings? Can we apply P4P more broadly beyond just simply nursing homes and preventing hospitalization? And so I think this next bullet point is one that I think some people disagree with, but I really think if we're going to see significant change occur, I don't know that we need to federalize Medicaid, but I think we need to see federal leadership. I don't think we can continue to depend on certain innovative states to lead. I think there's too few of those states. I think there's too many of the kind of laggards out there. Given the aging baby boom generation, given the continuing state budget shortfalls, once again, I don't know that we need federalization. We do need something from the feds, I think, that sort of sets some lower bounds here, begins to sort of bring up performance across the board, offers kind of models in states, the SNPs not even being available. in a set of states. And finally, I think reform will be much broader than simply aligning Medicaid and Medicare. And I didn't have a chance to talk about all the other problems in our healthcare system today, but certainly there are others, and this is one part. And there are reasons for nursing home hospitalizations, for example, that go way beyond simply this conflict. There was a nice paper recently published on the VA that showed high rates of hospitalizations from VA nursing homes. VA, there are no payment conflicts in the VA. You can say what you want about the VA, and it may be a poor comparison, but there are hospitalizations there that go beyond this simple issue, and they got a really high. It was an eye-opening rate of hospitalizations, and so we need to think beyond just simply payment tensions. Although I think payment tensions are a big part of the kind of problem in long-term care. So let me offer a few final thoughts, and then just acknowledge a couple of funders. I would argue, and sort of my punchline here is that Medicare and Medicaid's current structure introduces a number of conflicting incentives that we talked through today for long-term care. It's a long-standing problem, obviously with implications for costs, for quality, for those dually eligible beneficiaries. I think all of the solutions, whether it be capitation, P4P, federalization of Medicaid, all have promise, but all have drawbacks. And so I think we need more thought on sort of trying to begin to address these types of tensions. And finally, progress has been so slow in this area. To think sort of Bill Weisert's work showing that pay for performance back to the 1970s was effective in San Diego. And we're just getting around now to introducing a full demonstration. Those kind of lags are unfortunate. So how do we begin to sort of address and begin to speed up the sort of rate of adoption here of new ideas? So let me just acknowledge two of the papers I spent a lot of time on talking about today. My work with colleagues on potential savings in New York State was funded, supported by the Commonwealth Fund, and the work on Medicaid payment and bed hold and hospitalizations was funded by NIA. I just wanted to recognize those two funders and put up some references. On that, I'll conclude. I think I have 3 minutes according to my so Larry. Thanks.
David, this gets to the issue I mentioned before the session, and kind of the argument that I made with a colleague, Helen Lyon, November issue of gerontologist, where we take the position that we don't really need proprietary managed care in long-term care. What we have in long-term care for older people is an aging network. That's an incredible resource. There's nothing comparable to it for any other long-term care population. IPD, certainly not mental health. And it's been in place 35 years. And the state that has done the most to develop an integrated long-term care system outside of Oregon and Washington, which also used to be that way, to achieve their values.
Absolutely.
Is Wisconsin. Wisconsin developed a managed long-term care system based in the aging network.
Right.
As opposed to Texas and Florida, which developed managed care systems through proprietary aging providers. And it's our argument in that paper, presenting the data that's available, that what Wisconsin is doing is superior. And that as a matter of federal policy, we need to really maximize the opportunities that the aging network represents to integrate long-term care over the next 15 years, rather than just pretending it doesn't exist and thinking that maybe proprietary HMOs can replace it. Why do we do that?
No, I very much agree. I need to. You had mentioned that paper, and I very much want to give it a read when I get back. I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I think you raised that the Wisconsin program is one that is intriguing, and I think in need of, as you say, a further look. Another program that Bill Weissert has always been very positive about and thinks sort of gets ignored is Arizona, and one that I think will be interesting.
Arizona's particularly interesting. His study back in the late 90s
Yeah.
indicated it was a very cost-effective system, but since then they've gone from a public health nonprofit-based system to
Yeah.
one that's based in Evercare and these other HMOs. I'd like to see what it looks like now.
Absolutely. I agree. And it's a good way to conclude maybe is on the need for more research. Right.
Well, we have a class at 5 in here, so we can ask questions outside
Right.
of here.
Thanks, everyone.
David, thank you. I have to run because I have out of town guests coming.
Absolutely.
It's great to see you.
Thanks so much.
Yeah,
I keep hearing stories about traffic in Florida, and I guess you're going to go firsthand.
When you do this every week, you get